There was a time when you could sit on the roof of your West Phoenix house, way out at 25th Drive, and watch the northern pre-dawn sky glow with the flash of atomic bombs. It was 1951, and if the Nevada test sites were exploding, so was Arizona. It was the post-war boom that brought Paul and Lenore McCune here from Ohio. Paul would work at Goodyear Aircraft in Litchfield Park for the next 29 years, a period when all of Maricopa County grew from 125,000 souls to 15 times that number, and on to 3.5 million today. It was a simpler, more innocent time when Bill McCune and his three older brothers grew up in the city's public elementary and high schools, an experience captured poignantly and humorously in his very successful memoir, Welcome to Tisdale Terrace. In the early 60s, Phoenix College provided tuition-free higher education, and it was there that Bill developed an interest in government and politics. He volunteered in political campaigns, and more telling, was elected student body president. In that capacity, he helped organize in May 1964 the original successful $4.8 million bond issue campaign, which allowed the early development of the 11 Maricopa colleges. In 1968, at Arizona State University, he was conferred with a Bachelor of Science degree in political science. He accepted a job in community relations with the Junior College District in Kansas City, Missouri. But after 8 months, he jumped at the chance to work full-time in a Kansas gubernatorial campaign. The effort was unsuccessful, but led to the position in Washington, D.C. as press secretary to a Kansas congressman. After nearly 2 years away, it was time to return to Arizona, where by coincidence in 1970, there was an open seat for the Arizona House of Representatives in the very district where he grew up. At the minimum age of 25 and with no money, it was a long shot. But an active door-to-door campaign with an army of young volunteers put Bill McCune in the legislature. The next 6 years, first in the House and then in the Senate, saw successful legislative efforts in such areas as delinquency prevention, prison reform, and providing a 20-year retirement system for police and firefighters. For his efforts, Bill McCune was more than once chosen Man of the Year by various civic organizations and his local newspaper. In the early 1980s, he joined KAET, Channel 8, the PBS station at ASU, as the political editor for the daily public affairs show Horizon. For the next 3 years, he provided long-form, in-depth reports on state, city, and national political issues, and in the process learned the art of television documentary production. Then, in 1984, he launched the independent McCune Television, and during the intervening 20 years has written, produced, and hosted more than 80 television broadcast documentaries. The body of work covers a wide spectrum of subject matter, certainly political and social issues, environmental. Occasionally, programs have required more theatrical elements, sometimes dramatic, sometimes humorous, even a touch of Broadway, and performance. And his Emmy-nominated Live and Let Live Live, a concert of his poetry and storytelling, focusing on tolerance and diversity issues. There was the Consequences series, 6 documentaries aimed at teens and preteens, on decision-making about crime, drugs, and gangs. These were largely funded by the Arizona Supreme Court. By the way, For at least the past dozen years, all of the documentaries are backed with original music scores composed by Jay Steinberg, working in a symbiotic relationship with Bill McCune. Many projects have been shot in foreign countries, in Russia, with survivors of Stalin's reign of terror, with leaders of solidarity in Poland, in old East Berlin, with gypsies in the Czech Republic, among Catholic and Protestant teenagers in Belfast, and in Auschwitz. At the end of the war in Bosnia, Bill went and lived for a bit with the Turkusic family in Sarajevo, gathering their stories of 4 years under Serb bombardment. And then 8 months later returned to the Balkans to record life in the Kosovar refugee camps. As with other foreign projects, these were the subject of articles he wrote for the Arizona Republic. But of all his journalistic efforts, none is more important to Bill McCune than his significant contributions in the area of Arizona's history. Programs used in many of our state's schools and colleges and available in many public libraries. They are now being digitally remastered and prepared for DVD. They include The Road to Statehood, Our History Prior to 1912, The Spirit of Arizona, From Statehood to 1990, Almost Free, Arizona's African American History, Una Segunda Vista, a second look at Arizona's Hispanic heritage, The Women They Were, profiling 26 pioneer women, Indian, a 3-hour series on the history of every tribe that ever existed in Arizona, Barry Goldwater, An American Life, the quintessential 2-hour biography of the late senator, for which Barry made available some 40 years' worth of home movies shot on 16mm film. Arizona Highways, that ever-fantastical, magical magazine, captures the beauty of Arizona through the photos of that great magazine. It features narration by Bruce Babbitt, Barry Goldwater, and the songs of Dolan Ellis. Other shows cover the history of the state's newspapers, Arizona's water wars, and on and on. More recently, Bill McCune has produced but not yet broadcast Geo Arizona, an examination of the state's physical and cultural geography produced with the scholarly input of the Arizona Geographic Alliance, housed at ASU. And The Road to Nazlini, a colorful 2-hour study of Arizona's Native American spirituality, ceremonial practices, and cultural preservation efforts. This project was possible only with the help of numerous tribal spiritual leaders and the guidance of Professor Donald Barr and John Martin of ASU's Anthropology Department. But now the question is, what comes next in the calling of this extraordinary Arizona writer, producer, historian? As Bill McCune often says, history is never out of date. But with many eyewitnesses and participants in Arizona's 20th century history, now in their 70s, 80s, and some in their 90s, there is a real urgency for getting on with this work.
Hi, this is Bill McCune. That's quite an impressive biography you just saw. Well, in the spirit of full disclosure, yes, I wrote it myself. In my work, there's always another project on the horizon, and I want to tell you about it. This sweaty picture in the cockpit of a huge Air Force C-130 aircraft is part of it. Our next really big effort is the military history of the United States. It's a lot of research and homework and travel and tears.
Here's Gary, right here. I was holding the gauze on the bullet wound in his chest when another bullet struck him. And
twice in 2004 and 2005, I went over and embedded with the troops in Iraq. No big production crew, just me and my increasingly beat-up camera.
Get in. Now that's my job is to do this.
I linked up with a lot of fellow Arizonans. This was my most memorable Christmas morning ever, having coffee with my friend Sergeant Andy Stewart from the Arizona National Guard. We were at Camp Cook in a place called Taji, Muddy Taji. I spent a lot of time flying on Blackhawks or hanging out beside of them to get that great video shot. Well, not always. I wanted to ride in an Apache, but nobody flies in an Apache except the crew. But the brass from the 1st Cavalry Division coordinated some schedules and had a team of Apaches come up near me in a Blackhawk so I could film them in flight. I want to say that I viewed myself as an independent, podunk filmmaker representing no television station, much less a network. But the Army treated me as if I were someone really important. I don't know when the Military History Project will be finished, possibly late 2008, or maybe late 2009. As they say, check your local listings. My brief visits to Iraq were pretty insignificant compared to many other journalists, and really insignificant compared to all the troopers. But until I get that project finished, I hope you will enjoy this DVD set, The History and Heritage of Arizona. Learn from the 11 programs offered. Pass this history on to your children and grandchildren. For as I've been saying for 20 years, remember, history is never out of date.
That's the neat thing about history. It never gets out of date.
See? I told you I've been saying that for 20 years.
Adios.
And as I ride off into the sunset, I'd like to add one footnote. The decades of producing these and other programs has been a constant struggle of chasing sponsors and chasing money. But one man who really typifies the story of an Arizonan, John F. Long, has been there for us more often than not. He came from very little and developed a very successful company. And with his success, he never forgot where he came from, and he gave away an awful lot of what he had, including to us. And so we'd like to dedicate this Arizona History and Heritage DVD box set to Mr. John F. Long.